I told you this couldn't last forever.
It had to, Catherine.
It didn't have to cost you your marriage.
If Jane hears the truth from anyone but me, she will never forgive herself.
She filed, didn't she?
Yes.
She will hate you.
If losing my marriage is the price I have to pay to keep her safe, then I'll accept it.
My legs carried me backward before my mind caught up. The envelope slipped from my hands and landed softly on the hallway floor. For 24 years, I thought I knew my husband. But those few sentences made me wonder if I'd ever known him at all. My fingers wrapped tightly around the envelope in my hand. Inside were the divorce papers I'd signed less than an hour earlier. My attorney had smiled sympathetically as she slid them across the polished oak desk. Sometimes, she'd said, peace is worth more than answers. I had believed her. Now I wasn't so sure. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. My name is Jane Harper, I'm 50 years old. If someone had asked me 6 months earlier whether Lucas Harper and I would ever divorce, I would have laughed. Not because our marriage was perfect. No marriage survives 24 years without collecting its share of cracks. We argued over little things. He left coffee mugs everywhere except the dishwasher. I spent too much money decorating rooms no one ever visited. He insisted on watching old westerns every Sunday afternoon. I monopolized the television during football season with home renovation shows. Those were ordinary disagreements. Comfortable disagreements. The kind that come with knowing someone so well you could finish their sentences before they started. At least that's what I thought. We lived in a quiet neighborhood just outside Franklin, Tennessee, where tree-lined streets curved around brick homes with wide front porches and children still rode bicycles until sunset. Lucas owned a small architectural design firm in downtown Nashville. I managed the office of a family-owned real estate agency a few miles from home. Our daughter Ella was 22 and finishing graduate school in North Carolina. For the first time in decades, the house belonged only to us. People warned us about empty nest syndrome. Instead, I imagined weekend road trips. Long dinners. Growing old without rushing through every conversation. Instead, somewhere along the way, my husband became a stranger. It started with little things. The first time he missed our anniversary dinner. Lucas had never forgotten an anniversary. Not once. He called an hour late. "I'm sorry, Jane, a client emergency came up." His voice sounded tired. I believed him. Then he missed my birthday lunch. Then Thanksgiving shopping. Then our Friday movie nights. Each apology sounded sincere. Each excuse seemed reasonable. But they kept coming. One evening, I walked into the laundry room carrying a basket of towels when I heard him talking quietly in the garage. "I'll make another payment Friday." Silence. "No, she still doesn't know." Another pause. "I said she can't know." By the time I opened the garage door, he was ending the call. He smiled. "Everything okay?" I smiled back. "Of course." We both lied. The following week, I noticed our checking account was nearly $12,000 lower than it should have been. I assumed there had been a banking error. There wasn't. The withdrawals were real. $3,000. Then another $2,000. Then $1,500. Always transferred electronically. Always late at night. When I asked Lucas about it, he barely looked up from his laptop. "Business expenses. You've never used our personal account for business." "I'll put it back." "When?" "Soon." That was the entire conversation. No explanation. No apology. Just, "Soon." I wanted to believe him. I truly did. But trust isn't usually destroyed by one enormous betrayal. It fades quietly. Like paint left in the sun. Every unanswered question rubs away another layer until one morning you realize the color you loved has almost disappeared. A month later, I stopped by his office to surprise him with lunch. The receptionist smiled politely. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Harper. He left about 40 minutes ago." "Did he have a meeting?" "I think so. With a client." She hesitated. "I'm not really sure." That hesitation lingered with me all afternoon. Lucas came home after 7, carrying takeout from my favorite Italian restaurant. He kissed my forehead. "I've missed you." I searched his face. "How was work?" "Busy." "Did your meeting go well?" "What meeting?" "The one you left the office for." His fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Then he smiled. "Just a contractor." Nothing about his answer sounded natural. I changed the subject. That night, while he slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling until sunrise. People imagine suspicion arrives like lightning. It doesn't. It grows like ivy. Slowly, quietly, wrapping itself around every memory until nothing looks the way it used to. Then came the receipt. It was tucked inside the pocket of his sport coat, while I gathered clothes for the dry cleaner. A receipt from an upscale restaurant in downtown Nashville. 2 dinners, 2 desserts, a bottle of wine. $312. Tuesday night. Lucas had told me he was working late with engineers. I sat on the edge of our bed holding that little piece of paper. It weighed less than an ounce. Yet somehow it felt heavy enough to crush 24 years. When Lucas came home, I almost confronted him. Almost. Instead, I slipped the receipt back into his pocket exactly where I'd found it. I wanted more than suspicion. I wanted certainty. Looking back now, that decision changed everything. The next Saturday, my best friend Naomi invited me for coffee. She had known me since college. She took one look at my face before speaking. "How long have you been pretending everything's okay?" I forced a smile. "I'm just tired." "No." She stirred her coffee. "You're scared." The word landed harder than I expected. I stared through the cafe window at people walking hand in hand along Main Street. "I think Lucas is hiding something." "Another woman." "I don't know." "But you think so." "I don't know what to think anymore." Naomi reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Whatever it is, don't ignore your instincts." I've been trying not to jump to conclusions. Sometimes, she said gently, women don't jump to conclusions. They finally catch up to them. I wanted to argue. Instead, I cried. Not loudly. Just enough for the tears to fall into my untouched coffee. That afternoon, I drove home feeling emptier than when I'd left. Lucas's truck wasn't in the driveway. Neither was mine for long. Something inside me decided I couldn't keep wondering. If our marriage was ending, I deserved to know why. So I turned the key, backed out of the driveway, and followed the only clue I had. The address printed on that restaurant receipt. I had no idea that before the sun went down, I would see my husband walk into a building with a woman I had never seen before. And the sight of what happened next would convince me that filing for divorce was the only choice I had. I followed the address on the receipt with my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my fingers ached. Every traffic light felt longer than the last, giving me just enough time to convince myself I was being ridiculous. Maybe it really had been a business dinner. Maybe the receipt belonged to a client meeting. Maybe I was letting months of unanswered questions turn ordinary moments into something they weren't. I wanted to be wrong. I prayed I was wrong. The restaurant sat in a renovated brick building on a quiet street in downtown Nashville. It wasn't the kind of place Lucas and I visited often. It was elegant without being flashy, the sort of place couples celebrated anniversaries or executives closed important deals. I parked across the street where my car wouldn't stand out. For nearly 15 minutes, nothing happened. I almost laughed at myself. I was a 50-year-old woman hiding behind the windshield of her own SUV like some amateur detective. I reached for my purse, ready to admit I'd let fear get the better of me. Then Lucas's truck pulled into the parking lot. My heart stopped. He climbed out wearing the navy sport coat I'd ironed just 2 nights earlier. He looked around the lot before walking toward the entrance. He wasn't alone. A blonde woman stepped out of another vehicle parked several spaces away. She looked to be in her early 40s with long hair tucked beneath a cream-colored hat. She wore jeans, brown boots, and a simple green sweater. Nothing about her appearance seemed flashy or inappropriate. She smiled at Lucas. He smiled back. Then they walked inside together. I couldn't breathe. I sat there staring at the restaurant doors long after they disappeared inside. Every explanation I'd rehearsed dissolved in an instant. Business meetings didn't begin with warm smiles in parking lots. At least that's what I believed. I don't remember driving home. The next thing I remember was sitting alone at my kitchen table, staring at the clock while the lasagna I'd prepared for dinner grew cold in the oven. Lucas came home nearly 2 hours later than usual. He kissed my cheek as though nothing had happened. Something smells wonderful. I forced myself to smile. It probably doesn't anymore. He loosened his tie and poured himself a glass of water. Sorry I'm late. Busy day. You could say that. I wanted to ask who she'd been. Instead, I asked, did your meeting go well? He nodded without hesitation. It went exactly the way I hoped. The words hit me harder than they should have. Exactly the way I hoped. So he wasn't even sorry. He sat across from me and complimented the lasagna twice. I barely tasted a bite. The strange thing about betrayal is that it changes ordinary conversations. His smile suddenly looked rehearsed. His kindness felt calculated. Even the familiar sound of his laughter made me wonder how long he'd been pretending. That night after he fell asleep, I quietly unlocked his phone. For 24 years, I'd never once felt the need. Now my hands trembled as I typed the only 6 numbers I knew he'd never changed. Our wedding date. The screen opened. There weren't any romantic messages. No suspicious photos. No hidden social media accounts. Nothing. For a brief moment, relief washed over me. Then I opened his call history. One number appeared almost every evening. Sometimes twice a day. Always for several minutes. The contact wasn't saved under a name. Just a phone number. I copied it onto a notepad before locking the phone exactly as I'd found it. The next morning, while Lucas showered upstairs, curiosity got the better of me. I dialed the number from my office phone. After 3 rings, a cheerful female voice answered. Good morning, Harper Family Services. I froze. I'm sorry. I think I have the wrong number. I hung up before she could say another word. Harper Family Services. The name meant nothing to me. Lucas had never mentioned any business with that company. At lunch, I searched online. Nothing. No website. No reviews. No business listing. It was as though the company didn't exist. That afternoon, I couldn't concentrate at work. I entered the same client's information 3 times before my coworker gently pointed out my mistake. When I arrived home, there was a package leaning against the front door. It was addressed to Lucas. No return address. No company logos. Just his name written neatly across the front. I carried it inside and set it on the kitchen island. It wasn't heavy. Whatever was inside shifted softly when I picked it up. I told myself not to open it. I lasted nearly 5 minutes. Carefully, I slid a butter knife beneath the tape and lifted the flaps just enough to peek inside. There wasn't jewelry. There weren't clothes. There wasn't anything that looked romantic. Instead, I found a thick stack of old photographs tied together with faded blue ribbon. Beneath them lay several yellowed envelopes and what looked like legal documents. I reached for the photographs first. The woman in the first picture wasn't the blonde I'd seen outside the restaurant. She was older, maybe 60. Standing beside her was a little girl with long blonde hair. The next photograph showed the same child sitting on a porch swing beside a smiling couple I'd never seen before. Another picture. Another family. None of them included Lucas. I turned the stack over, hoping to find names written on the back. Only one photograph had anything at all. In faded black ink, someone had written, "For Jane, when the time is right." My stomach dropped. My name's written years before. I stared at those 4 words until I heard the garage door begin to open. Lucas was home. In a panic, I shoved everything back into the box exactly as I'd found it, sealed the top with fresh tape from the junk drawer, and stepped away just as he walked into the kitchen. He smiled. "Anything interesting come today?" For the first time in our marriage. I looked directly into my husband's eyes. And lied. "Just junk mail." He nodded, picked up the unopened box and carried it upstairs. I watched him disappear around the corner. Then one question echoed through my mind. If that package was meant for me, why had Lucas hidden it, and who had decided that the right time still hadn't come? I hardly slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those 4 words written on the back of the photograph. "For Jane, when the time is right." They didn't sound like the words of a man having an affair. They sounded like the words of someone keeping a secret. But secrets can destroy a marriage just as surely as lies. The next morning, Lucas left before sunrise. That wasn't unusual anymore. What was unusual was that he forgot his briefcase. I noticed it sitting beside the front door just as I was leaving for work. For a moment, I considered calling him. Instead, I carried it to my car, thinking I'd drop it off at his office. It felt like the right thing to do. Halfway there, my phone rang. It was Naomi. "You sound exhausted," she said as soon as I answered. "I barely slept." "Have you confronted him yet?" "No. What are you waiting for?" I don't even know what I'd accuse him of anymore. I told her about the photographs and the strange message. She was quiet for several seconds. "Jane, that's different." "I know. It doesn't prove he's innocent." "I know. But it doesn't prove he's guilty either." That was exactly the problem. Nothing made sense anymore. When I reached Lucas's office, his receptionist looked surprised to see me. "He left about 20 minutes ago." "Again?" She nodded. "He said he had an appointment." I glanced toward his office. "Would you mind if I left his briefcase on his desk?" "Of course not." She handed me the key. I walked into the office I'd visited dozens of times over the years. Everything looked exactly as it always had. The framed architectural drawings. The family picture from Ella's high school graduation. The coffee mug I'd given him one Christmas. I placed the briefcase beside his desk. As I turned to leave, something caught my attention. A large envelope lay partially hidden beneath a stack of blueprints. Across the front, in bold black letters, were the words, "Confidential." I shouldn't have looked. I knew that. But after months of unanswered questions, curiosity was stronger than guilt. I lifted the envelope just enough to read the first page inside. It wasn't a business contract. It wasn't architectural plans. It was a legal document. My eyes stopped on one sentence. "In the event of Jane Harper's signature." My pulse quickened. My signature. Why would a legal document need my signature without Lucas ever mentioning it? I heard footsteps in the hallway. Quickly, I slid everything back exactly as I'd found it and stepped outside. The receptionist smiled. "Everything okay?" I forced a smile. Just dropped it off. The drive home felt longer than ever. Every answer I found only created another question. That evening, Lucas came home carrying flowers. White lilies. My favorites. Once upon a time, they would have made me smile. Instead, they made me suspicious. "What are these for?" I asked. He looked almost embarrassed. I realized I haven't been very present lately. "You noticed. I'm sorry." There it was. The apology I'd been waiting months to hear. But something about it felt incomplete. Sorry for what? Working too much? Lying? Keeping secrets? Or something else entirely? "I've been thinking," he continued. "Maybe we should take a trip after all this is over." After all what is over? The question was sitting on the tip of my tongue. But before I could ask, his phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen. The color drained from his face. "I have to take this." He walked outside before answering. I watched through the living room window. He wasn't arguing. He wasn't smiling. He looked afraid. When he came back inside nearly 10 minutes later, I pretended to be reading. He looked at me for a long moment. "I have to go out for a little while. Tonight. It won't take long." "Where are you going?" "It's something I need to handle." "Can I come with you?" His answer came too quickly. "No." He softened his voice. "I'll explain everything soon." I'd heard those words before. Soon. Later. Trust me. Not yet. They had become the soundtrack of our marriage. After he left, I sat alone in the silent house. Then I remembered something. His location. Months earlier, Ella had insisted we all share our phone locations for emergencies. None of us had ever turned it off. I opened the app. Lucas's truck was moving south. Not toward his office. Not toward downtown Nashville. Toward a quiet residential neighborhood nearly 30 minutes away. I stared at the screen until his location stopped. He remained there. 10 minutes. 20. 30. Without allowing myself time to reconsider, I grabbed my keys. The address led me to a modest white house at the end of a quiet street. Nothing about it stood out. No expensive cars. No romantic getaway. Just an ordinary home with flower beds lining the porch. I parked half a block away. A few minutes later, Lucas walked up the front steps. Before he could knock, the door opened. The same blonde woman I'd seen outside the restaurant welcomed him inside. She hugged him. Not the quick hug of strangers. Not the intimate embrace of lovers either. Something in between. The front door closed. I felt my heart sink. I didn't know what I was looking at anymore. I sat there for almost an hour. Then another vehicle pulled into the driveway. I recognized it instantly. It belonged to Catherine. Lucas's sister climbed out carrying a large folder. She hurried into the same house. Now 3 people were inside. Lucas. Catherine. The mysterious blonde. None of it made sense. As I turned my car around to leave before anyone noticed me, my phone rang. It was Ella. I answered immediately. "Hi, sweetheart." Her voice sounded cheerful. "Mom, I finally reached Dad." "You did?" "Yeah, he said he couldn't talk because he was meeting with the woman who's been helping him for months." I nearly drove off the road. "The woman helping him?" "Yeah. He didn't tell you." My grip tightened on the steering wheel. "Tell me what?" There was a long pause. Then Ella said something that made every hair on the back of my neck stand up. "Mom, I thought you already knew why Dad has been looking for someone from your past." Looking for someone from my past. I pulled my car to the side of the road before I answered Ella. "What are you talking about?" There was a pause. "You really don't know?" No, Ellis. Dad asked me not to say anything because he wanted to tell you himself. Tell me what? She hesitated. I think you should talk to him. No, I said, my voice trembling. You've already said too much, please, tell me. I heard her sigh. A few months ago, Dad asked if I remembered anything about Grandma Evelyn before she passed away. It's my mother. Yes. He wanted old photo albums, letters, anything that mentioned the years before you were born. My heart skipped a beat. My mother hardly ever talked about those years. I know, Dad said there were gaps in her records, and he was trying to figure something out. What exactly? I don't know, he never explained. After we hung up, I sat in my car staring through the windshield. Nothing fit together. The photographs. The mysterious woman. The legal papers. The hidden payments. My mother's name. None of it resembled the affair I'd convinced myself Lucas was having. But if he wasn't betraying me, why keep everything secret? The next morning, I did something I never imagined I'd do. I followed Lucas again. This time, he drove straight to the same white house. Instead of waiting outside, I walked to the front door. My knees felt weak. Before I could knock, the door opened. The blonde woman stood there. She looked surprised to see me. You must be Jane. I stared at her. You know who I am. She nodded gently. I've been expecting this day. Before I could respond, Lucas appeared behind her. The look on his face wasn't guilt. It was heartbreak. Jane. His voice cracked. I wanted to tell you. When, I asked. After I filed for divorce. I never filed. I did. His eyes widened. What? I signed the papers yesterday. For the first time in 24 years, I watched my husband completely lose his composure. He sat down in the nearest chair, as if his legs could no longer hold him. You weren't supposed to do that. I laughed bitterly. What exactly was I supposed to do, Lucas? Ignore the lies, ignore the secret meetings, ignore the money disappearing. I know how it looked. No, you don't. Tears filled his eyes. I was trying to protect you. From what? Instead of answering, he looked at the blonde woman. She disappeared into another room, before returning with the same box I'd seen arrive at our house. She placed it carefully on the table. Lucas pushed it toward me. I think it's finally the right time. My hands shook as I untied the faded blue ribbon around the photographs. The first pictures were the ones I'd already seen. Then I found another. A young woman with my mother's smile. Standing beside her was another little girl. The child looked almost exactly like me. I turned the photograph over. 2 names were written on the back. Evelyn and Grace. I frowned. I don't understand. Lucas took a slow breath. Grace was your mother's younger sister. I looked at him in disbelief. My mother didn't have a sister. That's what she wanted everyone to believe. The blonde woman finally spoke. My name is Nancy. I looked at her. My mother was Grace. Everything around me seemed to stop. Nancy continued quietly. That makes us cousins. I stared at her face. For the first time, I noticed the resemblance. The same eyes. The same smile. Even the same tiny dimple my mother used to have. Lucas reached for another envelope. Inside was a letter. It was addressed to me. The handwriting belonged to my mother. I recognized it instantly. Lucas nodded toward it. Read it. By the second paragraph, I couldn't see through my tears. My mother confessed that after a bitter family dispute decades earlier, she had cut all contact with her younger sister. She regretted it every day of her life, but was too ashamed to reach out. Before she died, she begged Lucas to find Grace someday if he ever had the chance. Not for her. For me. I promised your mother, Lucas said quietly, I promised her I would reunite the family. I looked at him through blurred eyes. The payments. Grace became seriously ill last year. Nancy lowered her eyes. She didn't have insurance. Lucas continued. I used our savings to help with her treatments. You could have told me. I wanted to. So why didn't you? Because the lawyer warned me that until we proved the family connection, discussing your mother's estate could complicate everything. He handed me another folder. Inside were legal documents. They weren't divorce papers. They were probate records, genealogy reports, medical records, letters. Everything pointed to one purpose: finding the family my mother had lost. Then I remembered the sentence I'd seen inside the confidential envelope. In the event of Jane Harper's signature. Lucas smiled sadly. Those papers would transfer your mother's remaining inheritance to her only living blood relative. Nancy. He nodded. It was your decision. I covered my face with my hands. For months, I had believed the worst. Every late night. Every missing dollar. Every secret meeting. Every whispered conversation. None of it had been about another woman. It had been about honoring a promise. A promise he made to my dying mother. I overheard you telling Catherine you'd let me leave. Lucas looked down. I thought if I told you before everything was finished, you'd insist we spend the money on ourselves. He smiled through tears. That's exactly the kind of woman you are. He was right. I would have. I wasn't protecting a secret because I didn't trust you. He reached for my hand. I was protecting your chance to receive something your mother wanted you to have. I cried harder than I had in years. Not because I had almost lost my marriage. Because I had almost thrown it away. The divorce papers were still sitting inside my attorney's office. The very next morning I walked in, picked them up and tore them in half before she could say a word. She smiled. I take it you've changed your mind. I smiled back through happy tears. I learned that sometimes silence hides love, not betrayal. A month later, our family gathered for the first time. Nancy came with her children. Ella flew home for the weekend. Catherine brought homemade pies. Lucas stood beside me in our backyard, watching everyone laugh together as though they'd known each other forever. I slipped my hand into his. I'm sorry I stopped believing in us. He kissed my forehead. I'm sorry I made it so hard to. Neither of us was perfect. But we chose each other again. And this time, with no secrets, no assumptions, only truth. Looking back, I realize how close I came to ending the greatest blessing of my life, because I allowed fear to finish a story that wasn't finished yet. If there's one thing I hope you take away from my story, it's this. When trust is shaken, ask questions before you write the ending in your mind. Sometimes the truth is painful, sometimes it isn't, but giving the people we love a chance to speak can change everything. If this story touched you, please let us know in the comments what part resonated with you the most, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another heartfelt story. Thank you for watching.